Hey everybody, this is John. Today I wanted to go over how to pick your weights, and what I mean by how to pick your weights is more for when you want to go heavier and you're not sure what to go up to or if you should go up, because we are always trying to never miss reps. We want to get all of our reps, so whatever we're trying to do, we want to make sure that we can do it. So everyone has problems with this. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you've been doing this for a long time. The easiest way that I found to do it is called RPE, and asking people what their RPE is or what they perceive that as. So an RPE, okay, is your rate of perceived exertion. It's based out of a scale from 1 through 10. The easiest way to say this is 1 being the easiest, 10 being the hardest. Hey, you know, say somebody comes up to me and they say, hey, I want to increase on my bench press. I'm doing dumbbells. You know, I did 30s, what should I do next? You know, so then I would say, all right, well, out of a scale from 1 through 10, you know, what was that rated as? Well, how would you feel that was, you know, 10 being the hardest? And if they're saying like, hey, it's a 5 to 7, and say it's their last set, say they're gonna go hard, you know, they haven't done a heavier weight. So if it's like if it's below a 5, okay, 1 to 5, they definitely need to go up, okay? If it's a 5 to 7, okay, I would say, hey, go up depending on the movement. Okay, so say if we're at the higher end, say we're at a 7, and it depends on what we're doing. So that's where no matter what, this is where a coach comes in and they can say, hey, based off of you, based off of how it looked, because I saw you do your last set, I would say, based off the speed that you were able to push with it, say you're on the higher end. If you're on the lower end, like 5, I'd say, hey, we definitely want to go up. Then if we get to a 7, I'm like, hey, that's where it starts getting to the point where it depends on where we are in their training, depends on how we want them to do it, what the goal was for that movement this month anyways, or just say their training history or their training history or their injury history. But for the most part, we're like, hey, 5 to 7, you can go up. When we get to like 8 to 10 is when you definitely would need, hey, this is where a coach is either already prescribing the weights that they want you to do, and then saying, hey, we want you to go and do this. If somebody comes up to us and they said, hey, that was an 8 out of 10, the last one, but I think I can do more. Again, depending on what they can do, and then going from there. Obviously, when we get to these numbers where it's like an 8 out of 10 to like 1 if they're doing a 10, we usually don't get to a 10. That's like max effort, 1 rep max. This is probably somebody who's going for absolute strength. They're a power lifter. They're trying to get ready for, say, a competition. Otherwise, general public doesn't really need to go to a 10 out of 10. So usually people are floating around the 5 to 7, and it always is going to depend on the movement. When we start going into more of the movements, I'd say it depends on the percentage of the jump that you're making. So if we're looking at, say, a bench press, okay, the percentage that you can go up is very small, because, you know, a 1 or 2% increase actually makes a big difference. So say we're doing dumbbells, I actually bought other dumbbells that you can go up in 2.5 increments because of the percentage of what somebody can do. Say they're doing 20 pounds and they're gonna go up, you know, say, hey, I'm gonna go and do something that I've never done before. I'm like, hey, go up 2.5 pounds on each side. So instead of doing a 20, go do a 22.5. Because the 25 is such of an increase up. If they haven't built the strength up for it, we don't want them to do the set and not be able to do it. So when we're doing, say, a bench press, we're only going to go up maybe like, you know, 5% more, you know, depending on what tool they're using. If they're using a bar or a dumbbell. When you start thinking like lower body, typically like a deadlift. We could increase, you know, one set to the next by 20 pounds. Because again, percentage-wise of what you can do total is going to be much different, say, than your upper body. You have more muscles. You know, a deadlift does more muscles than any other movement, so you're capable of adding, say, that 20 pounds and feeling the difference. Otherwise, say if you added like a 5 per side on, say, a trap bar deadlift where you're grabbing and standing up with it, you almost, it'll feel heavier, but you won't almost feel it. Now, there's some movements that you can go way up. okay? Deadlifts and squats are pretty similar for the most part, but say like one you can increase the most on would be like a sled push, without the H, or it would be like a hip raise, or you have, let's say, a barbell on your hips and you're on your back and you would hip raise up off the ground. You can go up, 50 pounds a set. If you're like, hey, I want to go heavier, that was like really easy. And I'm like, well, then throw a 25 on each side. You'll feel it, but you can do it. And a lot of people, because it seems like such a big jump, they're like, oh, that seems like a crazy lot. And it's like, actually, for what you're doing, the range of motion of that, or pushing a sled, you can do much more. People can do more than what they think they can do. So a lot of this, I would say, look, if you're by yourself, it's going to be much more difficult to manage, but I would go to the RPE if you're like, hey, I'm not sure what to do. So I would say, hey, go, if you're at a 5 to 7, you can go up, but it would always be smaller than you think, okay? So, and then you would go, hey, well, what's the movement? Hey, well, if I'm a 5 to 7 and I want to go up, and then the next movement is, say, a bench press, that was kind of hard. Let's add 5s on each side. And you can calculate the percentage if you really wanted to, but I would say, hey, let's start at a 5. Use the plate size as an idea of like, hey, this one's the smallest. 2.5 you might not feel, depends on the person. And then say, oh, I'm going up in a deadlift. That was, a 4 out of 10. All right, well, then you can definitely go 20, maybe even 40 pounds up, say, on a deadlift. And then that would be the next percentage up, or a sled push hip raise, something like that. You'd say, hey, that was really easy. That was a 5, okay, add 50. Then it might go up to a 7 the next time you do it. You're like, all right, that was a 7. And we're like, you know what? Most of our people anyways kind of float in this 5 to 7, and that's just general public looking for, to get stronger, feel better. They're not, say, trying to be a power lifter, and that's okay if you want to do that, but usually those people are going to go, in the ranges of like 60 to 100%. That's typically where power lifters are going to hang out weightlifting wise, and they're probably going to be more towards like the 75, 85% most of the time, and then they're going to come up and they'll have like a set or two up in the higher ranges. But most of our people, look, if you're just trying to get stronger, feel better, you picking weights, if you're in this area 5 to 7 out of 10, usually 7's a good spot, like 70%. Think of it like 70% of what you can lift totally. Have a coach say, hey, you know what, based off of you and what I've seen you do, I would recommend this. If you're never sure, always ask somebody. But for the most part, always go lighter than you think, because you're trying to get better in the gym. You're not trying to get worse. So if you get hurt or you can't lift the weight, you don't want to get hurt that way. Make sure that you go smaller and then level yourself up so you're on the side of caution. And then depending on the lift, if it's a whole body lift, typically you can go much higher. And then go from there. So if you guys have any questions on anything with how to pick your weights, it's kind of a murky water thing. It kind of depends on the situation. But again, if you have any questions, let us know.